was tracing marriage records through European archives when I found something that stopped me cold. Not a missing document, not a lost certificate, but a pattern so precise it seemed deliberately constructed. The family trees were shown, the ones hanging in palaces and printed in textbooks. They present an unbroken chain stretching back centuries, clean lineages, documented marriages, bloodlines preserved with meticulous care. But when you follow the threads backward, when you trace the maternal lines past the official narratives, the documentation doesn't just thin. It vanishes at exactly the points where it should be strongest. And that's when the questions begin. Start with the women, the brides who married into the greatest dynasties of Europe during the 1700s and 1800s. We're told they came from minor German principalities, from distant noble houses so small they barely register on period maps. But here's what troubles me. When you attempt to trace these women's own ancestry back just 2 or 3 generations, you hit walls. Not the natural erosion of records across time, but systematic absence, as if their histories began the moment they became useful to the official story. These weren't peasant brides whose origins might reasonably be lost. These were women marrying into houses obsessed with bloodline purity, into families that documented everything, that preserved every scrap of genealogical proof. Yet their maternal ancestry simply stops. Documented forward from their marriages, blank spaces backward into their origins. The Romanos provide the clearest example. The official genealogy traces them to the Rurik dynasty, a supposedly unbroken succession reaching back centuries. The documentation exists, certainly. Marriage certificates, birth records, coronation decrees. But when you examine the bloodline itself, when you look past the paperwork to the actual genetic heritage, you find whispers. Academic whispers, the kind mentioned in footnotes then never explored. References to Tatar ancestry in major Russian noble families. Not Mongolian, Tatar. The word itself derivative of something we're not supposed to say aloud in historical circles, Tartary. Now, look westward to Britain. The House of Hanover imported from German territories in 1714. Protestant succession, parliamentary approval, legitimate claims through distant Stuart connections, all properly documented, all officially verified. Except when you trace where these German royals actually came from, you discover something peculiar. The principalities that provided them had themselves undergone recent dynastic changes, new families, new names, new heraldic symbols, all appearing within a generation or two of being summoned to supply British monarchs. The transitions too clean, too convenient, too perfectly timed. The deeper I went, the more I had to examine what these families built. Not the castles they inherited, but the structures they commissioned during their consolidation of power. The Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, major renovations to Buckingham Palace in London, expansions at Schönbrunn in Vienna, the Royal Palace in Madrid, constructed after the 1734 fire that conveniently destroyed the previous Habsburg residence. These buildings share more than architectural styles. They share specific technical features, construction methods, mathematical proportion systems, the same load distribution principles, the same decorative mathematics, the same engineering solutions to identical structural problems, across thousands of miles, across cultures that supposedly had minimal contact, across royal houses that were allegedly rivals. Who trained the architects? Different names appear in different countries, certainly, but when you attempt to trace where these men learned to build at such massive scale with such uniformity, where they studied these advanced techniques, the documentation goes cold. Not everywhere, just at the critical points, just where the knowledge would have been transmitted from one generation to the next. Let me show you something that maps cannot lie about. Pull up cartography from the 1600s and 1700s, French maps, Dutch maps, British maps. Look at the vast interior of Asia labelled Tartari. Not a small region, not a vague geographical designation. An enormous territory stretching from the Caspian Sea to the Pacific Ocean, from Siberia to the frontiers of China. These weren't speculative maps drawn by explorers guessing at unknown lands. They were trade maps, military maps, navigational charts created by cartographers who staked their professional reputations on accuracy. Merchants and generals depended on these maps being correct, and on many of them, you'll find symbols indicating cities, marking trade routes, and showing royal courts. Multiple royal courts throughout Tartarian territory, as if this wasn't scattered nomadic tribes, but an organized society with governmental infrastructure. Then, over the course of the late 1700s and early 1800s, the labels change. Tartary becomes Russia in the west, becomes Qing China in the east, becomes Ottoman territory in the south, becomes nameless space in between. The land gets redistributed on maps we can watch happen across successive editions, but the people, the governmental structures those earlier maps indicated, the royal courts, where did they go? When empires fall, we have documentation. Rome didn't vanish overnight. We have centuries of its decline recorded in exhaustive detail. The Byzantines left volumes of testimony about their final days. Even the Mongol Empire's fragmentation is extensively documented, but Tartary, if it existed as these maps suggest it did, we should have transition documentation, treaties of dissolution, succession disputes, refugee movements, resistance campaigns, something, instead silence. And into that silence step new royal families with suspiciously recent genealogies claiming territories that maps from just one generation earlier labelled as Tartarian. The official explanation collapses under examination. We're told Tartary was simply a catch-all term Europeans used for the unknown Asian interior, a map placeholder, not a real political entity. But that explanation requires us to believe that European cartographers, sophisticated enough to accurately map coastlines, document trade routes, and delineate territorial boundaries elsewhere, suddenly became vague and imprecise, only when addressing the largest landmass on their charts. That they drew borders, marked cities, indicated governmental seats, all for something that didn't actually exist as a cohesive civilization. Does that make sense? Now, we reach the most troubling aspect. The bloodline question isn't merely historical anymore. We have genetic testing. We can trace ancestry through DNA, confirming or refuting genealogical claims that once relied solely on documents. So why hasn't there been a comprehensive genetic study of European royal families mapping their actual heritage? Not the claimed ancestry written in official genealogies, but the genetic markers that don't lie. Some studies exist, certainly. Small ones, targeted investigations, but never a complete mapping of the royal bloodlines using modern genetic techniques. Why not? These families are obsessed with their heritage, with proving their legitimacy, with documenting their supposed divine right to rule, unless there's something they don't want discovered. Consider what DNA testing has revealed about ancient populations, groups we thought were isolated and pure show genetic markers from continents away. We know now that pure bloodlines are myths, that humanity is a tapestry of migration and mixing. So what would a comprehensive genetic study of European royalty reveal? What Central Asian markers might emerge? What Siberian genetic signatures might appear in families claiming pure Germanic or French or British descent? The silence becomes deafening. The same families who commission studies of their artwork, their archives, their architectural heritage, have shown remarkable disinterest in genetic verification of their bloodlines. Before you dismiss this as speculation, examine something specific. Go to Vienna, stand before Schönbrunn Palace, now travel to St. Petersburg, stand before the Winter Palace, now to Beijing, to the Forbidden City's outer structures. What do you notice? Not just similar architectural influences, the exact same proportion systems, the same mathematical relationships between height and width, the same ratios in window placements, the same geometric principles governing spatial arrangements. This isn't coincidence or parallel development. This is transmitted knowledge, specific technical understanding about large-scale construction, about load distribution, about using architecture to project power. And here's the critical detail. Many of these buildings were constructed or significantly modified during the same narrow window, the early to mid-1700s. The exact period when Tartaria was disappearing from maps and new dynasties were consolidating control. The official history attributes these similarities to travelling architects, to shared aesthetic trends, to the influence of classical masters. But that explanation requires incredible coordination. Architects from different empires, supposedly rivals, independently adopting not just similar styles, but identical mathematical systems. Building at massive scale in multiple capitals simultaneously. Doing all this while their patron families were allegedly competing for supremacy. Or, and I'm merely asking the question here, were they not rivals at all? Were these separate royal families actually branches of the same ancestral tree, building in a common architectural language that represented their shared heritage? A heritage requiring concealment. Look at royal heraldry, the symbols these families chose to represent themselves. Start with the double-headed eagle. It appears in the Holy Roman Empire's heraldry, the Russian Empire, the Byzantine Empire, several Balkan nations, various German principalities. We're told this symbol was adopted and readopted independently, that it represents different meanings in different contexts. But symbolism, this specific and complex, doesn't emerge randomly. The double-headed eagle requires precise artistic knowledge to render correctly, and it appears across cultures that supposedly had limited contact during the periods when it was incorporated into their official symbols. Examine other recurring elements, specific crown designs appearing in multiple royal houses, particular arrangements of lions and bears, the repeated use of certain color combinations in exact sequences. The pattern repeats with unsettling precision. These families weren't simply copying each other, they were using a common symbolic vocabulary, a visual language of power and legitimacy that predated their official founding dates, a language suggesting common ancestry they needed to obscure. Here's something that doesn't align with the official narrative. When royal families married across borders, language was allegedly a significant barrier. We have documented accounts of princesses arriving in new kingdoms unable to speak the local language, requiring years to learn. Yet we also have records of these same families conducting private correspondence, understanding each other perfectly when political negotiations demanded it. What language were they using in these private contexts? The official answer points to Latin or French, the diplomatic languages of Europe, but there are tantalizing references in old documents to other languages being employed in certain royal contexts, languages described as ancient or traditional but never specified, never taught, never recorded in detail. Count the fires. Seriously, compile a list of major fires that destroyed royal residences, government archives, genealogical records between 1650 and 1850, the Royal Palace in Madrid, 1734, the Library of Congress, 1814, the Hanover State Archives, multiple fires, most records lost. These are just the famous incidents. Dig deeper and you'll find dozens of smaller but critical fires that destroyed specific genealogical documentation, land registries, historical records during this transformative period. Some fires are inevitable across centuries, buildings constructed of wood, illuminated by open flames. Accidents happened, but the deeper I looked, the more I found fires occurring at suspiciously convenient moments, right before genealogical claims would require verification, right after territorial transitions, right when old records would contradict new official narratives. Let's discuss Siberia, because Siberia might be the key to everything. On those old maps, Siberia isn't Russian territory yet. It's labelled as part of Tartaria, vast, resource-rich, sparsely documented Siberia. Then, over a remarkably compressed period in the 1700s, it becomes Russian. Not through extensively documented conquest, not through treaties we can examine in detail. It just becomes Russian. The official explanation tells us Cossacks gradually expanded eastward, that local populations were primitive and offered little resistance, that Russia's claim was inevitable and natural. But here's what troubles me. When Russia did document its expansion into Siberia, the records describe encountering cities, not villages, cities with stone buildings, with organized populations, with established trade networks, cities that don't appear in modern historical narratives, cities that allegedly left no archaeological trace, despite being substantial enough for contemporary Russians to document their existence. Where did those cities go? Who built them? And if Siberia had an established urban civilization when Russia arrived, whose civilization was it? I've shown you architectural patterns that shouldn't exist if the official history is complete. Genealogical gaps in the most documented families in human history. Cartographic evidence of something vast that supposedly never existed. Genetic questions that remain deliberately unasked. Symbols and languages hinting at common ancestry. What does it mean? Maybe nothing. Maybe I'm seeing patterns in randomness, connections in coincidence. Maybe the official history is accurate and complete, and these anomalies are simply normal gaps in any historical record. But what if they're not? What if there was a widespread bloodline connected across vast distances that needed obscuring? What if the royal families we're told are separate lineages are actually branches of a single ancestral tree? What if Tartaria wasn't a vague geographical term, but a civilization whose descendants still rule, but rule under new names, new genealogies, new official histories? The next time you see a European palace, ask yourself who really built it. When you hear about royal bloodlines, question where those bloodlines actually originated. When you look at a modern map of Asia, wonder what was there before current borders were drawn, and ask yourself why we're not supposed to ask these questions, why the genealogical records stop at precisely the point where they'd reveal something important, why the maps change so completely in such compressed time, why the architecture speaks a language the official history refuses to translate. The deeper I went, the more I realized what we call history might be just the story the victors agreed to tell. And somewhere in the margins, in the deleted chapters, in the fires and missing records and too convenient genealogies, there might be another story. A story about who really built the world we inherited. A story we're not supposed to remember. But once you see it, you can't unsee it.